So let's turn to Texas, because obviously the fallout and the drip, drip, drip of police misconduct and cover up from Uvalde. We don't know what they're covering up yet, but to me, it seems like they're covering up something big. And at the very least, it's complete incompetence, but more likely, it's, I think, cowardice that led potentially to deaths. The New York Times, in its fashion, is piecing together reporting, and like they add their credibility to it. So now people are taking it seriously, what we've known for weeks, that the Uvalde cops were waiting for over an hour, despite knowing that children were injured in those classrooms. There were something like 33 children and 2 teachers in that classroom area, and there were kids that were like bleeding out, and it seems like cops knew that and did not act quickly enough. I mean, what's your response to some of that information? It's not particularly surprising, but it seems to be for a good chunk of the country.
I mean, and it's just sometimes hard for me to talk about because it's just, I can't imagine doing that to those kids. But I think it's time to also turn our anger to law enforcement, which I think very much failed in their duty to the community here. And before we get into some of the new information, Matt and I talked about this on Left Reckoning almost right after it happened. One of the most despicable things that came out of the early reportings was the cops were blaming one of the teachers, right, who valiantly defended those children with their life. And as he said in interviews, plus he since he didn't have a bulletproof vest, he got shot in the back. He got shot a couple times and thought he was going to die. And he's been in and out of surgery since the beginning, since the shooting. And the cops blamed him up front, said that he had propped open the door for the shooter, which turned out to not be true. Right. And it's just so despicable that the first thing that these police did after failing their community, failing these children, was immediately try to blame, one of the people who actually was trying to protect those kids. From what we've seen, I highly suggest people, there's a piece in Texas Tribune that really has started to map out this story that just came out. And every time you read these new updates, it's even more shocking than it was initially. And it was shocking, the day of. We're seeing not only that the police have been lying, that they have been shown to be cowards and put their own lives over the lives of these children and the lives in their community, but they have now completely gone rogue. So the DPS, the DPS, Texas DPS, initially was defending the police department, and then gave them the most mild criticism, saying, yeah, there are probably some mistakes that were made, which I'm sorry, just any kind of analysis in any situation, if that many children die, mistakes have been made. Yeah. And then the Uvalde Police Department has now said that they will no longer cooperate with the DPS. They also, just yesterday, this came out, that the city of Uvalde lawyers have sent Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, a laundry list of records that they are saying are exempted from public disclosure. So there's now going to be a long legal fight on the city level and on the police department level to just get the information out before even a judgment or decision is made about what to be done about this. They are fighting tooth and nail to just get this information out public. And I obviously you can only speculate at that point. What is it that they're trying to hide? But I think from the information that we have about how they acted in that moment is pretty damning, along with the fact, you have to remember that, Uvalde, like a lot of other small towns across this country, the police department budget is the highest line item on their budget. And this is what happens through a massive disinvestment in public good in society, that these guys are able to suck up a lot of money, and then they don't actively protect people in their community. They're more likely to harass or shoot a citizen than they are to save them. And in Texas in particular, right, one, through what Abbott has been doing on the state level, as I talked about last time, has been just, funneling billions of dollars to an unaccountable DPS here and the state troopers here. But they are not used to, DPS again has like come back, right, from their initial statements. But people probably saw those early videos of the head of the Texas DPS coming out and sort of defending everybody up front. And they look like a bumbling idiot because they are not used to ever being challenged or being held accountable, because that's the state of affairs in the state right now. And it's there's deadly consequences to that.
100%. And what's so maddening about this too is I guarantee you there's going to be a swell of people saying, well, this is why the police need more funding. But like their equipment was more than enough. Their resources were more than enough. They had everything they could have needed. And what really stood in the way here, seemingly, was the officer in charge of operations, the chief, I believe, basically told them to stand down because they were so afraid, even with all of that artillery, even with all of that protection. They were waiting on shields. They were waiting on extra stuff. I mean, they were cowards, basically, despite having that enormous amount of money and the proportion of the town's funds. So nothing is going to change the way. This was their human choices that led to this, not the material at their disposal. And so then that begs the question, what does policing as currently constructed do for our society?
I mean, I think it's a very fair question, and just it should be noted too that the school district in Uvalde has now said that their responses are going to hire more police officers for the school district. So that's already starting to happen. And look, I'm not a combat tactician or anything like that. But handguns themselves, especially with body armor, are designed for close quarters combat, right? So like, of course you would want in a situation like that to be decked out with all the things, that could maybe make a conflict like that easier. But when you're hearing kids screaming for help and are being shot and you are already equipped with a deadly weapon with the training to use that, I don't know. It's just sort of like, what do we have to wait for these guys to get like Gundam suits before they're going to come and like help out children? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
And also there's a police code to this, and I'm pretty sure said like you wait for, once you have two law enforcement massed, you breach, right? I'm pretty sure that their handbook literally said that, and they didn't follow that.
They had 60 officers standing outside the school talking with one another. And as we've gotten more of like the leaked audio from the from the shooting, they were very concerned about the way this was going to look to the public. They were already talking about, oh, is this going to make us look bad? Are we going to be, maligned for this? I mean, think about that. That's where your mind is going when something horrible like that is happening. It really does boggle the mind. And I mean, I must say, like, I think that this is a moment where it's time to believe police. When they say I shot this, black kid because I was fearing for my life, we should believe them that they're scared. And they're worried as a class of people. And, we really need to take that seriously as we're trying to build public policy that actually works to help defend people from these kind of horrors. That like right now, what we have is we have a lot of scared people walking around with access to a lot of post-military equipment, are able to walk around with a handgun and are able to basically impose their will on people.
And to me, their strategy seems clear, that they're trying to wait out the national media coverage. Like these cops are probably used to dealing with the same people in the same town. And I mean, frankly, you can mirror it onto the federal level right now with Republicans talking about different door strategies, having one point of entry. They don't. I genuinely believe they don't actually believe that's a solution. No. They are just trying to throw something out there like a squirrel, like look at that, so that in a month people forget about this and they don't have to act. I'm wondering what your take is on that.
Oh, I mean, on the police department and the media, I think that's 100% true. I mean, the larger kind of mass media, hub near them is San Antonio, which is about 40 minutes away. And you can see how the police have been treating national media, or even just like state, Texas media in general. Yeah, I think 100% they're hoping that eventually people are going to get tired of their accommodations in Uvalde and, go back down to Austin and San Antonio, and maybe they'll drive back if something happens. But yeah, 100%, I think that they're trying to wait this out. I mean, hell, they're even trying to wait out the state government at this point. So, let alone reporters, they're basically turning their backs on the higher authority in the state of Texas. I mean, as for national Republicans, I mean, I think it's absolute disgrace, to be talking about doors like that. I also hate the language. I know this is a small point, but I hate the language of calling schools targets, saying we need to harden our targets. I mean, it just shows just how perverse this crisis has gotten, that we talk about the place where we educate children, our next generation, as a target. I mean, it's just endlessly clear that these people have no real interest in doing anything about it. After the shooting happened, people rightfully were, making hay about the fact that Abbott and other state leadership was going to be speaking at the NRA convention. And when Beto came and confronted Abbott, people have probably seen that clip at the press conference. One of the guys in there was saying, like, how dare you politicize this? How dare you politicize this? I'm sorry. At this point, it already is politicized. Who is speaking at the NRA convention? Greg Abbott, right? Who is speaking at the NRA convention? Ted Cruz, Republican, Ken Paxton, etc. And now, while, after praying and thinking about it, some, didn't speak at all, or I know Abbott sent in a video message. It just shows that they have already politicized this issue. And it's always really disgusting when they sit here and say, after something like this happens, like, how dare anybody try to politicize a tragedy when they've been, walking and, surviving on this politically for a very, very long time.
It's funny you mentioned Ted Cruz, because you sent this tweet to me of him blaming the Green New Deal for electricity costs in Texas. I mean, given the grid failure that we saw, when was that? I mean, was that 6 months ago? God, time blends together. 20. It was in 2020?
Well, no, sorry. It was 2021. Sorry. I'm losing my mind, too.
Okay. All right. So it was last year. Just making sure that, my mind isn't completely gone already. What has the update been on the? Has there been any changes to the grid in Texas? Because this is going to happen again.
So right now it's, near 100 degrees, and it looks like it's probably going to be 100 degrees every day in June. ERCOT, which, governs the system here, has said that, we're in a crisis situation, and we might have record-breaking demand for electricity throughout the weekend, right? Which means for people, the threat of blackouts. And, in the same way that it's really dangerous when it's cold, when you run out of, the ability to control the temperature in your own home, it's very dangerous when it's like this. Nothing. And I wanted to bring up that Cruz thing because he's trying to blame Biden,
for the Green New Deal that hasn't happened.
Which is so ridiculous. And Texas has expanded its wind and solar, which is certainly helpful. Of course, they try to blame that after the winter storm, when, again, it was natural gas pipelines that froze over. And I just want to make this point as a socialist, somebody who wants to see a different kind of system here. Why do these providers fail to weatherize their systems? It's because they make a decision that is much more profitable for them to just keep everything online. And if, they lose out on revenue for a couple of days, so be it. If they end up being one of the winners who doesn't lose out when the power is going out from other providers, they get to make a lot of money. And the crisis in Texas is caused by this decentralized, over-marketized system where it's a constant auction house on electricity, so prices can shoot up dramatically in a matter of minutes. And not only have they not done very much to deal with this, they pass some kind of weatherize your stuff, but we have no enforcement mechanism, so just like a nice little letter from the government here. And by the way, all these people donate millions of dollars to Greg Abbott, and they did immediately after he basically slowballed any kind of response to this. But this is not the only crisis, but just shows how ridiculous it is here. After all this has been happening, guess who comes to town? All these Bitcoin boys and little freaks to try to take advantage of weak and underfunded city governments, to try to create contracts with city governments and providers to get a set rate for electricity, right? So that they can constantly mine Bitcoins. And people were like, well, this is great. They're using their arguments like, oh, we're using up unused power, and then we'll encourage more investment in capacity. Well, one, that's not what's happening. And two, what ends up happening is in a moment like this, right, where we're actually saying, everybody, we need to conserve energy. Prices are going to be going up. They're sitting there, right, paying those same prices while taking on a huge amount of power to mine Bitcoins, right? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And Greg Abbott not only is approving this, he's taking pictures with them and saying, look, Texas is running at the speed of business, right? I mean, just absolutely irresponsible at this moment. And we need to be building up a much stronger movement on this. And I think that power itself is something not just in Texas, but for the left in general, is something that I think is a very viable way to fight for the things that we care about. One, dealing with climate change, but two, creating good union jobs, making sure that people have access, to being able to afford electricity in their homes, right? There's a lot of fights that can be happening. And I think, at least in Texas, like this is a huge political opportunity for people to show that, like, look, they don't care about you at all. Not only will they not make it better, they're actually willing to make it worse for no real benefit to themselves.
Or for crypto. I mean, like the fact that they're able to negotiate some sort of fixed rate for themselves in order to mine. I mean, did that actually happen or whatever? The fact that they feel like they can negotiate some sort of fixed price for themselves for this incredibly electricity intensive, massive project. I mean, people don't. Bitcoin is like, when they advertise it as this democratizing force, it's incredibly environmentally wasteful, and part of why these like disaster capitalist Bitcoin bros go to countries in South America to exploit them is because they can like work around and still still use all of their energy in a predatory manner. But that shows that the price fixing is possible if Abbott was interested in it, but he's only interested in providing it for capitalists that are going to bring business to Texas.
And like, you have to understand, like, our grid is like the most privatized grid. So you actually have, providers competing against each other. So it's a constant auction house. And that means that prices can just, skyrocket exponentially. So whenever you hear Ted Cruz going on about the windmills and the solar rigs, it's like, no, friend, it is 100% an over marketized system. Not any of these kind of, new technologies. But yeah, I mean, it's a joke. And like, beyond that, like in the same vein as what you're talking about, like in El Salvador with Bitcoin, right? They do that internally here with, cities that are struggling. So like Denton, Texas had, a bunch of shadowy, crypto guys show up and say, we'll pay off the city's debts if you let us set up shop here and eat into your electricity market, right? So certainly a bad decision by the government there, but it's a decision that comes out of like the crisis that so many, cities and towns across this country are facing, where it's like they don't have the revenue to basically provide services or to pay, to take care of their debts. And these are the guys who are going to come in moments like that and take advantage of entire communities with very, very serious consequences.